What's up, guys? My name is John Evans. I coach many of the highest jumpers in the world, like Isaiah Rivera, Dylan McCarthy, Donovan Hawkins, and the list goes on and on. In this video, I'm going to tell you 5 things that you need to have in your vertical jump program to reach your genetic potential. Specifically, we're talking about periodization and how to plan training. If you are writing your own training plan, it is imperative that you watch this entire video. Otherwise, I can guarantee that your training is not optimal and you will not reach your genetic potential. All right, so the first thing that we're talking about is volume. You need to make sure that you start with high volumes and you go to low volumes. So a good example of this would be the first month starting with 6x10 and then the last month of your training being 6x1. This is obviously a very simple example, but it does illustrate the point that you need to start with very, very high volumes, 60 reps in this case, and progress all the way down to 6 reps in a given session, for example, a squat. One important thing to note is you can do this linearly, meaning you can progressively decrease the volume week to week or month to month. So for example, if you started with 6x10 and that was the end of your first month of training, then the next month, maybe you go to 5x8 at the end of that month, and the next month you end at 7x4. Now I want to be clear, volume as defined as the total amount of reps. It's not frequency, it's not density, it is the total amount of reps that you're doing in a given week or in a given month. If you're looking at sprints, it would be the total distance. If you're looking at jumps, it would be the total amount of jumps that you do. I also want to be clear that volume is not high rep ranges. You could do 1x10 3 times a week and your total volume is only 30 reps. Or you could do 20x1 3 times a week and your total volume would be 60 reps for a given exercise. So don't conflate the two, they are different things. Number 2, we are going to start with lower intensities and progress to higher intensities. Intensity is defined as the weight, how far you're moving that weight, how fast you're moving that weight, and how many joints are involved in that activity. If we look at jumping, this is a very high intensity exercise. You're using every single joint in your body and you're moving it across a very, very big distance very, very quickly. Sprinting is also a very high intensity exercise. You're applying maximum force very, very quickly with every single joint in the body. I'm going to give you a few examples of things that are way less intense than another exercise. For example, a curl will always be less intense than a clean. A clean is going to use all of the joints in the body. You're using your hips, your quads, and your hamstrings and your calves. A curl is only going to be using your bicep primarily. Sprinting will always be more intense than distance running. Sprinting is higher intent. You're using the same muscles, but it's much, much faster. And lastly, we're going to look at a full clean compared to a power clean. A full clean at maximum loads is always going to be more intense than a power clean at maximum loads. The only way this might flip is if the full clean was at a lower intensity and you weren't moving it with maximum intent versus a power clean at a maximum intensity that you're moving with maximum intent. Simply put, intensity is a measure of intramuscular and neural demand. If you have very high force in the muscle and you have very high neural demand, you're going to have very high intensity for that exercise. An example of going from lower intensity to higher intensity would be starting with something like extensive tempo, cross fields at a sub-maximal speed, and progressing to all-out sprinting across that field. Another example would be using a sumo deadlift in month 1 and then month 4 or 5 when you're closer to competition using something like a power clean or a jump squat. I want to take a brief second to tell you guys if you're interested in getting coaching to go to THPStrength.com. We progress all of these things out for you guys and it will help you reach your genetic potential if you trust us, stick to the process, and you work immensely hard. Right now we're running a deal, it's 90% off your first month. So if you're interested in that, go to THPStrength.com and sign up. All right, number 3, you need to go from less specific things to more specific things. Specificity can be thought of as how much a given exercise mimics the activity or goal outcome. This not only applies to how much the movement looks like something else, but how much the intramuscular force, the neural demands, and the joint sequencing matches the goal outcome. For example, if you're throwing a 3-pound shot put versus a 16-pound shot put, while both of those movements look very, very similar, the problem is that the intramuscular forces and the neural demands are not even going to be remotely close to each other. Throwing a 16-pound shot put requires different timing, the forces are much higher, and the proximal to distal sequencing, meaning using your hip all the way through pushing the shot out of your hand, is going to have much greater energy building and releasing of that energy at push-off. If we're looking at jumping and we're looking at something like a 135-pound back squat with maximum intent versus a 405-pound back squat at maximum intent, the 135-pound back squat could be considered more specific. The reason for this is that jumping is a relatively fast movement. This is the reason why powerlifters don't always jump very high. They can move 600 or 650 pounds in a back squat, but they don't necessarily move 135 pounds or 60 pounds or their body weight incredibly fast. When you're looking at specificity, you do want to look at velocity, but I would encourage you to look at the intramuscular forces. Are the intramuscular forces incredibly high? Are they happening really fast? Is the stretch shortening cycle happening in the same sequence that it would in the given outcome? For example, jumping. A quick example of this, month 1, you might start with something like a deadlift. The next month, you might do something like a clean pull. The next month, I would encourage you to do something like a power clean and then progress to something like a hang power clean. The reason for this is you're doing something slower and high force and you're progressing to something powerful with a stretch shortening cycle in the case base of a hang power clean. Number 4, you cannot have high specificity, high volume, and high intensity at the same time. The reason for this is that you will get hurt. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You have to balance these variables. Another reason why is because training monotony will set in. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, your body doesn't see a different stimuli and it doesn't adapt to anything because there's no progressive overload. I see a lot of people out there that will hammer jump volume. They'll do really, really high volumes of depth jumps, which are very specific, bounding, which is very specific, and sprinting, which is very specific. While these are super potent stimuli, if you do them at really high volumes along with jumping and maybe even squatting, you are bound to get hurt. If you've been following Noah Lyle's training, you've probably noticed that close to the season, he's doing a lot of 100-meter sprints and very, very low volumes of sprint volume with very, very general work around it. The reason for this is because he has a very high volume of specific, intense work. He's not outside the boundaries of what he can handle, but he's balancing it with very, very general work. To sum this up, if you're really, really close to competition, you want a low volume of very, very high intensity specific work, and you want a very high volume of very, very general work. This helps balance out the variables and keeps you healthy across the competitive season while still benefiting from those very sharp neural stimuli that you would get from things like stiffness hops, 110-meter sprints, max effort jumping if you're a jumper, and other similar movements that would mimic whatever goal outcome you have. Now, if you are going to have periods of very, very high specific volume, you want to do that about 2 to 3 months out from your competitive period. We call this a specific preparatory phase. It comes before the pre-competitive and competitive phase, and this ensures that you're getting the maximum adaptation, but you still are able to stay healthy, or if issues pop up, you can deal with them leading into the competitive season. And lastly, number 5, you want to do things that are complementary and compatible on the same days. For example, if you're sprinting on Monday, you want to pair it with other high neural demands like power cleans or heavy back squats with high intent. And this ensures that your brain and your body understands that when you're doing something that's very high intent or very forceful, that you're doing it with a purpose of applying it to whatever activity you're trying to get better at. We don't want to mix demands that are kind of similar but kind of not really similar, because when you're dealing with these really sensitive metrics that are very hard to improve, we don't want to convolute things. We don't want to confuse our brain and have us doing something that's kind of fast and kind of slow. We want to be all gas, no brakes on the days that we're trying to be all gas and no brakes. This will maximize adaptation, and it will ultimately help you achieve your genetic potential. If you were to do easy, slow movements on the same days that you're sprinting, this is going to minimize the recruitment of those high threshold motor units that require maximum intent from your brain or maximum neural drive to recruit. And remember, more motor units means more output and means you will be jumping higher. Where this becomes an issue is with in-season athletes. A lot of volleyball players and basketball players that are playing 4, 5, 6 days a week don't have the luxury of being able to go out and perform at a high level and come back to the weight room and do power cleans or jump squats or these other high neural demanding activities. In this scenario, I would encourage you to go back to point 4 and balance variables. Remember, you cannot have high volume, high specificity, and high intensity at the same time. If this is you, then what I would encourage you to do is on your easy days, try to hit some squats, try to hit some power cleans, and maintain those qualities. In most cases, athletes that are in season are very detrained anyways, so any amount of squatting is going to increase their force capacity, and it will end up benefiting them as well as keeping them healthy. But again, you want to keep these things very general because you're probably in the pre-competitive or competitive phase of your training year. That's the video, guys. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below. I do my best to get back. Please subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.